Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be doing a book review of The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Shaffer. I remembered the title, but I forgot the author. By Mary Ann Shaffer and Annie Barrows. The title's a bit of a mouthful, but trust me, the more you say it, the more you get used to it. This is a post-World War II historical novel set in England in 1946. The main character is a 30-something writer named Juliet Ashton. She's found success on national and international stages with a series of diverting columns called Izzy Bickerstaff Goes to War, but now the war is over and Juliet needs something new to write about. In the midst of stressful book tours and promotions and depressing writer's block, she receives a letter from someone on the island of Guernsey who found her name and address written inside a book of Charles Lamb's essays. This letter makes passing reference to the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society and the secret devouring of a roast pig during German occupation. Juliet's curiosity is piqued, of course, by these little nuggets of information, so she starts what turns into a fascinating and amusing correspondence with all the members of the society. This book is that correspondence, 100% composed of letters and telegrams written back and forth between various interesting characters, which, if you're a fan of the dying art of letter writing, should be enough to thrill your heart right there. This is definitely a book that appeals to readers and book lovers. So much of it is about people of different backgrounds and tastes coming together and discovering a mutual love of reading. Some of these individuals were never interested in reading before, some of them find one book that they love that they read over and over again. Regardless, they all discover the power of reading to inspire, to move, and to unite. But it's also a World War II story. I'm not sure which aspect made me want to read it more. The fact that it was a war story, the fact that it was about reading. What with it being only 1946, and the effects of war still very present on everyone's minds, the characters do a lot of war story swapping. Juliet tells the isolated inhabitants of Guernsey what everyday civilian life was like in England, with air raids and rationing and V-1 rockets or pilotless bombs, which, it's crazy, I just saw a movie that was about pilotless bombs. I'll talk more about that when I do my What Else I Saw in October video. Likewise, her correspondence on Guernsey gradually opened up to her about all the aspects of life on the island during the German occupation, a lot of which was news to me because it's not something you hear very much about, but was also news to Juliet. Since the Nazis severed all communication between the islands and the British mainland when they invaded, the British were mostly ignorant about the situation their fellow citizens were facing, where the threat of incarceration in a Nazi concentration camp in Europe was very real. I should clarify that the book is mainly light and comedic in tone, with a lot of humorous stories and a generally airy conversational flow, and Juliet in particular gets into some hilarious predicaments. It does have some darker, serious, more tragic moments as difficult war experiences are touched on, but they're not dwelled on. This is a story about people who have survived war coming back to life again. In other words, this is not a story that's really trying to leave you an emotional mess at the end, unlike some other stories I can think of. There's a little romance, too. I had been expecting that there would be a love story blooming at some point, but I did discover about halfway through that I'd been barking up the wrong tree in that department, which required a little mental readjustment on my part. Whoops! I also found it had some good quotations. There was one line I really liked that Juliet wrote in which she said, "That's what I love about reading. One tiny thing will interest you in a book, and that tiny thing will lead you on to another book, and another bit there will lead you on to a third book. It's geometrically progressive, all with no end in sight, and for no other reason than sheer enjoyment." That's kind of happened to me with this book. I had already heard of it from a friend who read it and really liked it, and then another friend and I were talking about the German occupation of the British Isles, because that's the kind of thing I talk about sometimes, and she recommended it, so I read it, and then in the book, The main character has written a biography of Anne Bronte, which she's actually pretty proud of, but nobody else cares about because they're far more interested in her silly little Izzy Bickerstaff columns. That reminded me that after I read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall a couple years ago, I wanted to read more Anne Bronte, but I kind of forgot, and that reminded me also that I had recently read a discussion of Agnes Grey, and so I've decided I'm going to read Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. So yeah, I'd say the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society leading me to read Agnes Grey by name-dropping Anne Bronte does fit in with the geometrically progressive formula. But it's also made me want to seek out more epistolary-style novels. I've read a couple this year that I really loved. Belle Kaufman's Up the Down Staircase, which I reviewed. I recently reread Anne of Windy Poplars, which is half regular storytelling and half Anne's letters to Gilbert, with all the mushy love parts cut out, which apparently really disappoints some people. And given that I've enjoyed letter-based stories in the past, like Dracula by Bram Stoker, and Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster, I'm going on the hunt for more because I think it's a thing I like. Coming back to the review at hand, I should mention that Guernsey does have a few far-fetched and oddly convenient things that happen. There are also some loose ends that either didn't get tied up or got tied up too quickly in the end. But the author, Mary Ann Shaffer, got sick before she finished writing. She asked her niece, Annie Barrows, to come in and help her finish it, but Mary Ann Shaffer died before the book was published. Considering the difficulty of that situation, I completely understand why there may be some minor discrepancies. Now, this book came out in 2008, and there is a film adaptation coming out sometime soonish. That's all I know. I don't know anything about who's in it or what it's going to be like. I have purposely stayed away from all of that information until I could read the book because I wanted to be able to picture the characters as themselves, not as certain actors. You know what I mean, right? So I can't give you any information about that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye!